Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 4 of my 2021 reads. This week I read 4 books, 2 of which were really outstanding. First, I finished Business Model Generation by Alexander Osterwalder, Yves, Pigneur, and designed by Alan Smith. This is a business nonfiction book which is about how to think about creating a business model. So how to think about the different components such as your customers and your delivery mechanisms and your revenue streams, these sorts of things. So this book I think had a lot of core ideas. It's very influential in terms of how to think about businesses, really good in terms of splitting up all of the different components and how to think about them together. But I also thought that it could have been a series of blog posts or a book that was 50 pages instead of 350 pages. It felt like there were so many examples and just so much fluff that was included in this that it took a long time to read for really what could have been condensed down to a much shorter book. I think especially just I noticed that sometimes the book would take a paragraph to say what really could be said in a sentence. So it just felt very, very wordy. And often there were a lot of diagrams and illustrations that just weren't needed or were hand drawn to add some sense of authenticity to it, but were hard to read because of that. It definitely wasn't 100% my style in terms of reading the book, even though I think that the core ideas in the book are good. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read a book which was very much my style, and that is The Stone Wētā by Octavia Cade. This book is fantastic. I heard about this from Rachel at Kalanadi, who did a review of it, which is fantastic, and I will link that review below. Please do check it out. It is so good. It convinced me to pick up this book, and I'm so glad that I did because I loved it so much. So Sush actually read this out loud to me, and both of us were blown away by how much we loved it. It is a near-future science fiction story about basically where the world is very similar to now, except that we have like colonies on Mars and climate change has gotten a bit worse. And we follow a network of scientists who basically kind of have an underground espionage group that hides data because a lot of the governments and corporations are trying to silence them and not allow them to share the real numbers. So they're trying to resist that and protect the data. It is such a great story. It really has this espionage thriller feel, but also this quiet, contemplative science fiction feel. It has a bunch of nature writing because each of the members of this kind of scientist spy network has a code name, which is an animal or an organism in nature. And it talks about, at the beginning of each chapter, the way that those animals and organisms resist climate change or resist things that attack them, and it's just it is so beautiful. I have a standalone review for this, which I will post later this week because I thought it was so good. Please watch that if you're interested. Watch Rachel's. Please pick this book up. I was so sad to see that this only has 30 reviews, 30 ratings actually on Goodreads, and it deserves so many more. I really would love to see this on the short lists for different SFF awards this year. So if you're somebody who votes in anything like the Hugos or the BookTube SFF awards, please pick this up and read it. It's only 133 pages. It is so good. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I would highly recommend it. Next is another book that I loved so much and will have a standalone review for in maybe a week or 2, and that is Redemption in Indigo by Karen Lord. I had heard such good things about this from a number of different booktubers. I know Njeri at ONYX Pages, Maija at Maija Reads, Angela at Literature Science Alliance, all of them had talked about how good this book was, and it really was. So I will have a standalone review for that coming, but basically this story just made me so happy. It was such a joy to read. It is based on a Senegalese myth, and it follows a middle-aged woman, Pama, who is in a marriage that isn't so great, but one day some trickster spirits give her the chaos stick, which is something that can affect chance. And that gives her a lot of power. However, the Indigo Lord, who it belongs to and it was stolen from, is trying to get it back from her. So she has to deal with him. She has to deal with learning how to use the stick, and she has to deal with a very difficult husband. There is so much in this. It's super feminist. It's super, super funny. It's got all of this mythology. I loved this story so much. I definitely recommend it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I hope you will pick it up too. And lastly, I read How I Became a Ghost by Tim Tingle. This is a book that I think I might have heard about from Melitta at the Midnight Librarian, who I will link below. It is a middle grade about the Trail of Tears. So that's a really heavy thing. The author of this is Choctaw and a storyteller. So he has taken a lot of the stories of different people in the Choctaw community and ancestors and made this middle grade story kind of talking about that experience of the Trail of Tears. If you're not familiar, the Trail of Tears was a really awful part of American history where the US government forced a bunch of different groups of Native Americans to move a very long way away and walking through the winter, and just so many people died, And that's what this book is about. It is heavy. I knew because it was the Trail of Tears that this was going to be heavy, but it was really heavy. So this story, it takes place, during the Trail of Tears, and it's about a little boy who knows that he is going to die. He has been seeing ghosts, and they have told him that he is going to die and he's going to become a ghost soon. And so we follow him as his family is forced off of their land and onto the Trail of Tears, and as people around him die and become ghosts. There's a lot in this. I mean, there's people burning to death alive. There's a lot of death in this, and a lot of it's pretty gruesome, which is a lot for a middle grade, but also very accurate for Trail of Tears. And I think that this book balances that by really focusing on the idea of the people who die becoming ghosts and being these ancestors whose spirits help the people who are still living. And there's also some, especially later in the book, after the main boy becomes a ghost, there's a lot of things that he does to try to help. So there is some heart and some sweetness to this story, but there's so much heaviness too, and just the amount of really gruesome deaths is kind of a lot. Also, this book is interesting because it's written at a very young middle grade reader level. So I would say that the reading level is something like 2nd or 3rd grade, very, very young, even though the content I feel would be much more appropriate for like 6th or 7th or 8th grade type of middle grade reader. So I thought that was an interesting contrast between how young it read and how heavy I found the topics. But I'm not a middle grade student, so maybe there are 3rd and 4th graders who can totally handle this kind of heaviness. Even though this is definitely a difficult book in terms of that content, I also thought it was really, really well done. I really enjoyed just learning more about the Trail of Tears from a Choctaw perspective. So I still definitely recommend this. Just be aware it is heavy. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I will continue because it is a series, so I want to read the other books in it. Okay, so that's everything that I read this week. If you guys have read any of these, if you have any thoughts, any recommendations, anything at all, go ahead and leave me a comment down below.